40 million credit and debit cards. That is what walked out of Target during the holiday season of 2013, and the log data needed to stop it was already sitting in their systems. Here's the part that should keep every security professional up at night. The alarm actually went off. Their monitoring system flagged the malware twice. Analysts in one office saw it, passed it to another office, and then nothing happened. The logs were screaming and nobody read them in time. So today we answer one question the exam loves to test. When something goes wrong, where do you actually look?
This is Sarah, and that question is Objective 4.9 in plain language. Given a scenario, use data sources to support an investigation. The exam hands you a breach and asks which log answers the question in front of you.
Right, Sarah. We just finished digital forensics, the chain of custody, and the bit-for-bit image. Today we go one level deeper into the raw material a forensic case is built from. The logs and the packets themselves.
Hi everyone, Tiffany here. So the version going around study groups is, just check the firewall log and you will find everything, which is half true at best. The firewall sees connections, source address, destination, port, allow or deny. It cannot tell you what a user typed or which process spawned a shell.
Leo jumping in, and the endpoint log is where you find that. The endpoint, the actual workstation or server, records the process that ran, the file that got written, the account that did it, 6 sources, and each one sees a different slice of the same attack.
And that is the part beginners miss. It is not firewall versus endpoint, it is firewall plus endpoint.
Exactly. 2 more on that list earn their own mention. The application log captures what a specific program did, the failed database query, the web server error, the crashed service. The intrusion system log, your IDS or IPS, fires when traffic matches a known bad signature.
Add metadata to that. Metadata is the data about the data. Who sent the email, when, from which device, how large the file was. It is often the thread that ties 2 unrelated logs together. The exam treats metadata as a first-class data source, not an afterthought.
And the trap is thinking one log is enough. The firewall says a connection happened, the endpoint says a process ran, and neither alone tells you a breach occurred. You need both, lined up in time. That overlap is the whole skill.
Which is exactly why the investigator earns the paycheck. Correlation across sources. Taking 6 partial stories and building one true timeline. That is the muscle this whole episode trains.
So hold these 6 in your head because they are the whole map for today. Firewall and network logs watch the wire, while application and endpoint logs watch the host. The OS security log watches who logged in, and the intrusion system watches for known bad patterns. 6 witnesses, 1 event. Before we open a single one of them, Sarah flagged a question that lands under almost every video on this topic. Sarah, go ahead and ask it.
Yes, and it is the one beginners ask first. With 6 different log sources, how do I know which log to open first when an alert fires? Hold that thought, because the answer is the timeline we build at the end.
Great question, and we will answer it the hard way by living through a real intrusion. We start where most investigations start, on the machine itself. Leo, take us into the Windows logs.
Let me show you what a real Windows investigation looks like, because this is where the exam stops being theory. Windows records security events into the security log, and you read it 2 ways. Event Viewer if you like clicking, or PowerShell if you want power. We are using power. Picture the scene. An account is getting hammered with login attempts overnight, and the OS security log is the witness. So I open a terminal and ask Windows a direct question. Show me every failed logon, event 4625.
And 4625 is the number to memorize. An account failed to log on. Watch the command pull them straight out of the security log.
Look at the timestamps, 2 seconds apart, over and over, in the dead of night. That cadence is a machine, not a tired human mistyping a password. Now I want the detail on one of them.
There it is. The account is administrator. The source is one external address. The failure reason is bad password, and the logon type is 3, a network logon. That is a textbook password spraying or brute force pattern, and the OS security log just handed it to you.
And that logon type field is worth a pause because it is a quiet exam favorite. Type 2 is an interactive logon, someone at the physical keyboard. Type 3 is over the network, like this attack. Type 10 is a remote desktop session,
which tells a story on its own. A Type 10 remote desktop logon for the administrator account at 3 in the morning from an address you have never seen is its own alarm before you read another field. Context turns a raw event into a finding.
Now the question that separates a pass from a fail: what if one of those attempts succeeded? You switch the number, because 4624 is a successful logon. If a 4624 from that same external address shows up after the storm of 4625s, the attacker is in.
And then I chase what they did next, with 4688 process creation. Here is the gotcha CompTIA loves. By default, 4688 tells you a process ran but hides the command line. Without that, you see that PowerShell launched but not the malicious one-liner it ran.
Which is why mature shops add sysmon. Sysmon event 1 is also process creation, but it captures the full command line, the parent process and the file hash, the things 4688 leaves blank. Same idea, far richer endpoint log.
And the parent process is the part that catches real attacks. When the log shows that your Word document spawned PowerShell, that parent-child chain is a screaming red flag. A document should never launch a shell. Sysmon hands you that lineage. The standard log does not.
And do not sleep on 4720, account created, and 4672, special privileges assigned. An attacker who got in will often make a new admin account to keep their foothold. Those two event IDs are how persistence shows up in the log.
Think of it as the kill chain written in event IDs. 4624 they are in, then 4688 they run their tools, then 4720 they build a way back. Read those three in order and you have the whole story.
Tiffany raised a hand on the exam angle here, so let me bring her in to ask it the way a test question would.
Tiffany, take it. This is the wording that trips people.
Thanks, here is the trap. An analyst sees hundreds of failed logons followed by one success from the same address. Which event ID confirms the account was actually compromised, the 4625 storm, or the lone 4624?
The 4624. The failures show the attempt. The single success is the breach. CompTIA wants you to know the success event is the one that proves they got in, not the noise of failures around it.
Let me pause for just a second, because this genuinely helps. If you are getting value here, hit that like button, then subscribe and ring the bell. It costs you nothing, and it is the single biggest thing that keeps these videos coming.
Now flip the operating system, because 4.9 says OS-specific security logs, and Linux is the other half of that. The story is identical, the dialect is different. Windows gives you numbered event IDs. Linux gives you plain text lines you read and filter. There are two places to look, and the exam expects you to know both. The classic one is the text files under the varlog directory. Authentication events land in auth.log on Debian systems, or secure on Red Hat systems. Let me show you the failed login hunt.
Stop right there. Same address as the Windows scene, 203.0.113.47, 2 seconds apart, hammering root then admin. That failed password line is the exact Linux twin of Windows event 4625. One attacker, both operating systems, one timeline.
And grep is what makes a log usable. A busy server writes tens of thousands of lines a day, and grep throws away everything that does not match, leaving you the 4 lines that matter. Now the modern Linux twist. Systemd does not use a text file. It uses a binary journal you read with the journalctl command. So the same hunt on a systemd box looks like this. I ask the journal for just the SSH service, then filter for failures.
And there is the gut punch, accepted password. After 50 failures, one got in at 2:14 and 19 seconds, and accepted is the Linux 4624. The exam wants you to spot that flip from failed to accepted, because that single line is the moment the breach happened.
I would put real money on journalctl showing up in a performance-based question. Scoping by unit, by time, by priority. It is the modern way, and CompTIA chases the modern way.
Fair, but do not abandon the text files. Plenty of production servers, and almost every appliance and firewall, still ship plain syslog over the network to a central collector. Both live in the objective. No grep on a text log and journalctl on a journal, and you are covered either way.
And syslog has one detail the exam loves to slip into a question. Every syslog message carries a severity level, numbered 0 through 7. 0 is an emergency. The system is unusable. 7 is plain debug noise.
So lower number means more urgent. That feels backwards until it sticks.
Right, and here is why it matters to an investigator. Tuning your collector to alert on the low numbers, the emergencies, and the critical and error levels is how you avoid drowning. You do not want a page every time a service logs a debug line. Filter by severity, surface the serious.
And shipping logs to a central collector does more than tidy them up. The instant a log leaves the host, it is out of the attacker's reach. They can wipe the local copy on the box they own, but the copy already forwarded to your log server is safe. That is why centralized logging is a control, not just convenience.
And the exam frames that as log integrity. If your only copy lives on the compromised machine, a smart attacker edits it and your timeline is now a lie. A forwarded, append-only copy is what lets you trust the record at all. No trustworthy log, no trustworthy investigation.
Which is the half-truth I want to bust here. People assume a log is automatically evidence. It is only evidence if you can show it was not tampered with. Forwarding it off the host, the instant it is written, is how you earn that trust.
Which is the perfect bridge to the next idea. We have read logs the host wrote about itself, but a clever attacker can still race you to edit a host log before it forwards. So the question becomes, is there a source the attacker cannot rewrite at all? Leo, set it up.
Logs are what a host says about itself. A packet capture is what actually crossed the wire, and the wire does not lie. If an attacker deletes a log to cover their tracks, a capture taken at the network level still holds the traffic. This is the data source 4.9 calls packet captures. On Linux, the capture tool is tcpdump, and it is everywhere, on every server, no install. Let me grab traffic to and from that attacker address and write it to a file we can keep.
Note the -w, that writes a packet capture file, a .pkeypack. That file is evidence. You preserve it and you hash it, exactly like the disk image from our forensics episode. Now we read it back.
That is chilling. You can read the attacker typing. Port 444 phoning home, the word Huami, the answer root, then cat of the shadow file. That is a reverse shell stealing the password hashes captured in the attacker's own words.
And notice how surgical the capture was. That host filter at the start told tcpdump to grab only traffic touching that one address, ignoring everything else on a busy link. That is a capture filter, and on a real network it is the difference between a usable file and 100 gigabytes you can never sift.
You can filter even tighter. Add port 444 to the expression and you keep only the command and control channel. The skill the exam rewards is not capturing everything, it is capturing the right slice, so the evidence is small enough to actually read.
This is exactly the moment to hear from someone who stares at captures all day, not from a slide. I have a packet analysis specialist standing by who reads this stuff cold. Let me get them on the line.
Happy to be here. The honest truth from the field is that the capture is the source you trust when every other log is in question. A host log can be wiped by whoever owns the box, but the packets sit outside the attacker's reach.
So if you only had time for one habit, what would it be?
Capture to a file first, analyze later, exactly like you did with -w. Reading packets live as they fly past is how you miss the one that matters. That is my one rule, so thanks for having me on. Save the file, hash it, then take your time in the deep read tool.
Great call, and that deep read tool is Wireshark. Thanks for the field check. Let me put the real thing up so you recognize it on exam day and at your first SOC job.
Wireshark reads a capture in 3 panes, top to bottom. The packet list, every frame with its time, source, destination, and protocol. The detail tree sits in the middle, and the raw bytes at the bottom, and that middle tree is the exam point. Expand one packet, and you see all 4 layers stacked. The link layer with the source and destination hardware address. The network layer with the IP addresses. The transport layer carries the port numbers. And the payload underneath is the data itself.
So the capture answers the question logs cannot, exactly what data left the network. A firewall log says a connection to that address happened, and the capture shows the shadow file going out the door. One says it happened, the other shows you the crime.
And that is why a packet capture is treated as evidence in a real case, exactly like the disk image from our forensics episode. You hash the .pe pack the moment you save it, and that hash proves in court it was never altered. A capture without a hash is a story. A capture with one is proof.
Half-true myth to bust before we move on. People say a capture proves everything, but it does not if the traffic was encrypted. Over transport layer security, you see the connection, the addresses, the timing, and the size, but the payload is scrambled. The metadata still helps, the contents do not, so know that limit.
So now we have it all: firewall, endpoint, OS security logs on 2 systems, and the packet capture, each one a partial witness. The real exam skill, the thing the performance-based question actually grades, is putting them in order. Stick with me, because lining them up is what we do right now. Let me bring the team together for that. Here's where it all comes together, and it answers Sarah's opening question. Which log do you open first? The honest answer is you do not pick one, you line them all up on a single clock and read the story across them. Here's the timeline we just lived through. Watch the order, because the order is the whole point. Each source caught a different second of the same intrusion, and laid end to end they confess the complete attack.
And none of that lines up without one quiet hero synchronized time. Every device pointed at the same time source, so 2:14 on the firewall is the same instant as 2:14 on the server. Without time sync, your timeline is just a pile of unrelated lines, and that is why network time is a real exam topic.
And 4.9 names more than raw logs as data sources. Dashboards show the spike at a glance, automated reports summarize the night, and vulnerability scans tell you which hole they came through. They are all inputs to the same timeline, just pre-chewed for you.
Do not skip metadata in that list either, even on the encrypted traffic we could not read. Who talked to whom, how often, how much data, at what hour. The contents may be scrambled, but a workstation suddenly sending gigabytes to a foreign address at 3 a.m. is its own loud signal.
That is exactly how exfiltration gets caught when you cannot see inside the packets. The volume and the timing betray it. Metadata is not the consolation prize, it is often the only prize, and it is plenty. Now I want to push on something, because there is a real debate inside a security operations center about this. Erica, can we hash it out? Where the team actually disagrees is whether the bottleneck is detection or response.
Good, let us do it properly. Leo thinks the hard part is seeing the attack in the flood of logs. Tiffany thinks seeing it was never the problem. Leo, make your case.
A busy enterprise writes millions of log lines a day. The 4624 that means breach is one line in that ocean. Tuning the alerts, cutting the false positives, building the correlation so the real signal surfaces, that is the genuinely hard engineering. Most teams drown in noise.
I hear you, but you are only half right here.
Go on, make the case, because I do not think I am.
Look at Target. The detection worked. FireEye flagged the malware twice and even named the staging servers. The alert traveled from Bangalore to Minneapolis. A human looked at it and chose to do nothing. 40 million cards. And the log was not the failure. The response was.
That is a fair hit, and honestly it dents my side. The best-tuned alert in the world is worthless if it lands in an inbox nobody acts on.
So here's where the record actually lands, and it is not a tie. Detection is necessary but not sufficient. You cannot respond to what you never saw, so Leo's correlation work is the price of entry. But Target proves a generated alert that nobody actions is the same as no alert at all. The data sources exist to drive a decision, and the investigation only matters if it ends in an action.
Which is the exam's whole worldview in one sentence. 4.9 teaches you to gather the sources, and 4.8, incident response, demands you act on them. The performance-based question that ties them together hands you these exact logs and asks you to reconstruct the order. The bottom line: gather every source, then act.
Here is the one thing to carry out of today. No single log tells the whole story, so you lay firewall, endpoint, and OS security logs on a synchronized clock and read the timeline across all of them.
And you can do this tonight. Open a terminal, run get-win event for 4625 on Windows, or grep failed password in your auth log on Linux, and watch your own machine tell you who has been knocking. The commands we typed are real.
Next episode, the one fact about a resold hard drive that should make you nervous, because delete is not the same as wipe, and that gap hands strangers files you thought were gone.
If event 4625 and a packet capture finally clicked, hit like and subscribe. We are building the whole Security SY0-701 objective by objective free, with practice quizzes on our cert site to drill these event IDs.
One for the comments before you go. When you investigate, which do you open first, the logs or the packet capture, and why? Tell us your reasoning below.
Class dismissed. Thank you for learning with me today. This is Professor Erica.